There we are.
Wear arts to shirts.
Hello, Privacy Roundtable. Hello, you're live on Droidcon Italy.
Hello, Lucy.
Hi.
Can you hear us?
How are you all today? You can just hit me a thumbs up if you want to. You all doing good? Awesome. So I know you've got our expert, Marco Porcaro, who's going to be your host for today. Marco, we really are getting our money's worth out of you today. Working for it. So I'll hand straight over to you. Take it away, guys.
Thank you, Lucy. Well, today we're going to talk about privacy, and the topic is privacy in the wrong century. So we're going to talk about why privacy matters and what is privacy, and a lot of stuff related to the privacy. And guys, I ask you to introduce yourself. Please, you're free to start.
Okay, so I will be the first one. My name is Jorge, and I've been doing mobile development consultancy and training, both for Android and iOS since 2013. And well, before that, I was into software security. I was doing penetration testing and hacking, so I had some experience related to security.
I can go next. So my name is Marco Holgado. I've been an Android engineer for 10 years now or so. I work at DuckDuckGo, which is an internet privacy company. So our whole idea is that we want to provide an all-in-one solution to help you stay private online.
All right, I can go. My name is Jason Pearson, and I'm a principal Android engineer at Hinge. I've been doing Android since about 2015. Originally joined as a backend engineer. So I came from a bunch of backend languages like Node and Scala into the Java land, and Kotlin is wonderful, and seeing all these languages evolve is amazing.
And lastly, hi, I am Sebastiano. I work for JetBrains. I have been doing Android professionally since 2012, but now I'm doing a bit more other stuff as well, not just Android.
And I guess lastly, it's me, another Sebastiano for you all. This time working for Blinkist as an Android engineer, been doing Android since, I don't know, as long as I can remember. But I'm also a privacy and security enthusiast. So yeah, nice to be here.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you all. And so let's start. First question to you. What is privacy and why does it matter so much? Because we talk a lot about privacy, but what is this privacy? Where is the limit between my privacy is respected or not?
And I can pick this one up. I think for me, privacy is basically freedom. It's about treating people like people rather than just data points. And the problem with privacy is that right now people we don't really think that we can do anything about that, because you have Google, you have Facebook, they're watching us. And the fact is that you have studies that have shown that when someone knows that they're being watched, they just basically act different, which just makes you lose all your self-expression. So this kind of surveillance is just causing people to change their behavior and basically become conformist. So this whole thing, what is privacy? For me, it's basically freedom. It's being able to go wherever I want to without having that feeling that I'm being observed. And I can run for this about an hour, but I'll let others.
I have just one remark over what you said, Marcos, because I came across recently, actually, this difference between privacy and anonymity. And since I think we're gonna mention these words during this panel for quite a while, I think it's important to strike a definition, like a difference between the two. And the definition that I came across is that privacy means that your identity is known, but not your actions, as opposed to being anonymous, which means that your identity is not known, but the actions that you do are. And I think this, to me, at least, was very enlightening. And yeah, it was very clear.
So
Yes.
I would like to make a comment also regarding privacy. I believe that this is a 21st century problem as we are putting it now, because in the past, if you wanted to know what other people were doing, you would have to go and have somebody watching at every moment in their lives and understanding what they were doing, what their interests were, what their tastes were, what they were going to do, and what way they were not doing. And this is something that nowadays is possible. You can pretty easily measure every aspect of your life by controlling the devices or the ways you connect to the internet and getting this information that is beyond what anybody could do like 50 years ago. And obviously, it was a big difference since that could have been done. And that affects not only your sense of being able to do whatever you want, but also your decisions, the ability to influence what you are going to do based on previous points of data that they have taken of you. And they are able to segregate groups and help us, push us a little bit to do different things based on that data. And that is a big problem in terms of freedom. Not only just in terms of I don't want other people to know what is happening, but also in terms of I want to be able to exercise my freedom to do things without any external influence.
Sorry, go on.
Okay, thank you. I was going to say I have one thing to add to this, which is privacy is very much a relative concept. It depends a lot on the culture. It depends a lot on the time that you're referring to, because even nowadays, the privacy expectations of someone that lives in a Western country are not the same that the privacy expectations of someone that lives, for example, in China. As we all know, in China, privacy doesn't really exist. And people are mostly okay with it for several reasons, but including the fact that it gets them benefits that otherwise they don't think they would get. Even in Europe, the difference is quite stark between the privacy expectations of someone that lives in Britain versus someone that lives, for example, in Germany. Obviously, as we know, Germany is a very privacy aware country, whereas maybe in the UK, they are closer to the Anglo-Saxon mindset where privacy is important, but not necessarily as much. And then you go to the US, which is different as well. So yeah, just wanted to point that out.
I've been following, as everyone has this year with COVID, and one of the interesting things with China and privacy was the COVID tracking apps and how you were not allowed to go from one area to another. But this also gave a huge safety thing, a convenience thing to the public. But at the same time, someone decompiled the source code and saw that this data was being funneled directly to the local law enforcement. And I think there's different sides to privacy and what data is being talked about and how it's being talked about. And it's just so strange to me to think that law enforcement would get medical data straight from my phone, the thing that I carry around all the time that has like my most personal relationships.
Okay, well, Marcos, I don't know if you...
Yeah, just like wanted to point out as well, because I mean, we're talking about like convenience as well. Like, it's convenient that these companies kind of have this data, so I can, you know, I can get a notification if I've been exposed to coronavirus, for example. I think the issue is that most of the data is not collected in the service of user convenience. The data that's being collected is my income level, like a lot of different political biases, race. And it's what Jorge was saying, that what's happening right now is that we have these big companies that are gathering all that data and are putting us in what's called like a filter bubble. So that's a big problem. I mean, obviously politically is a big issue. Like 2016, like no one, I mean, I wasn't expecting Trump to win the elections. I wasn't expecting Brexit to happen. And the reason is because I'm so inside my filter bubble that I don't hear other opinions, which also like the reason why Trumpism has basically gone up this much, because they're on their own filter. And unless we can stop that from happening and we can start making our own decisions without all these biases that we just being fed, our society is not going to improve a lot. We're just going to be keeping getting apart from everyone else. So yeah, it's like convenience, but convenience for who? Because these companies are all making money with our data. And the whole goal from them, their whole business model is not helping us, is to earn more money through our click-through. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know everything is kind of like scary, but we can do better.
And I think I remember when Snowden came out, and then there was that huge rush for encryption right after, and saying, "Oh, maybe encryption can save us and solve all problems with privacy." And actually, it can't. You can encrypt end to end, but if you are at the end of the day trusting a company with your data, then they do have access to it. And who they choose to share their keys with has been shown in the news again and again as something that can and does happen.
Yeah, like encryption is a funny one as well, because I mean, I'm not sure if you heard, but you know, like Apple released Big Sur like a few weeks ago, and they had some issues with like backend services and whatnot. And some people found out that your computer was sending them an encrypted hash. In theory, people were like, "Oh, we're sending them the information of the apps that we are opening," which is kind of scary. Then the whole thing ended up being like, "Oh no, it's okay. We just send in a hash contains the encrypted certificate that they have issued." So, okay, fine. Maybe like a third party that's just sniffing on your connection doesn't know the app that you're opening, which actually they can, because if your company only happens to have one app, then you kind of know. But also the fact is that who's issuing those certificates is Apple, so they can know because they are issuing that. So it doesn't even matter, because at the end, there's this big company which has that information, which can exploit it in any way.
And it is also a company that in China, for example, allows the government to access all their data to be able to sell their devices in China.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, sorry, Marco.
Sorry, Jorge. I was asking, since you talked about Apple, basically Apple is making a big deal of the warranties, talks a lot about privacy, and so it's everything fake, or does they really care about privacy? So what do you think about it?
I mean, I don't think it's fake. I mean, I think we are seeing a change in these companies. I mean, I would like them to be more proactive rather than reactive. But anyways, that's me. And so I think there are like good intentions there. I think there are good things like, I don't know, Safari just blocking by default third-party cookies. It's the beginning. is not good enough. Like you can go into websites like, I don't know, CNN.com, and you will see that Facebook is actually putting cookies in the first party bucket. So there's a lot of things that we need to do. Like, first of all, it's just we actually need to block the requests that go to trackers. And that's not happening yet. I'm sure it will, but it's this kind of like privacy washing thing where they're just kind of like telling you that, hey, everything is great. You don't have to worry about this because we are doing this thing that's going to protect you. And then you kind of like stop caring, when in reality, they're not really doing that much. They just try to make you think that something is simple when in reality it's not.
One of the interesting things about Apple and security and privacy that I saw recently was there's this new standard called certificate transparency. And actually, if you are coding an iOS app, it's just a little checkbox in Xcode that you need to check, and then it works. That was really amazing to see, especially comparing that to Android, where certificate transparency was a standard created by Google, but you either need to do some black magic with Conscript to get it to work, or you need to trust a third-party library Babylon Health has been working on, and there's some promising work being done there. But it's great that Apple did push that standard in terms of making it available for app developers to at least make their own connections back to their home servers much more secure than was previous.
So the way I feel about Apple and privacy is a mixed bag, I would say, because on one hand, all their efforts towards making, let's say, privacy more accessible to their large user base, like all the iDevices that people use, that is very nice of them, I would say. But at the same time, I think especially nowadays, privacy sells quite a bit. Like it's almost become a buzzword. And if you slap privacy on a product, then that's likely going to sell more up until a certain level. So what I think Apple is doing, and yeah, call them smart, call them, I don't know, whatever you want, but I think they're hitting a nice trade-off between introducing a little bit more privacy, just enough to like, I don't know, acquire more users or retain the ones that they have, but not introducing as much privacy so that it doesn't become an obstacle to the users, because we all know that privacy usually comes at a cost of convenience.
And also to their business, more importantly.
And that's the natural consequence of that. So I think they're really good at striking this balance between, let's add a little bit more privacy, but let's not sacrifice too much convenience for it. And I think right now it is definitely leaning towards the more convenience rather than the more privacy.
Okay, and what about Android instead? Do you think that it's better or worse for the user in the privacy limits? And someone is asking, for example, do you have Google Play services on your phone? And what kind of privacy techniques do you use in your daily life?
So let me start with that one. I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So, regarding Android, I do have Google Play services enabled on my device. And it is a trade-off, as we mentioned before, between convenience and privacy. And you have to be aware, and you have to put some extra work on getting this privacy, and also in order to avoid the bubble that Marcos was mentioning before. And I think the latter is easier than the former. So you can do an active effort to go and search for other sources of data, other sources of news, the ones that you don't like, the ones that you are not so interested in, the ones that are not showing up on your screen as this is what you want to do. When you do that, you are making this bubble at least bigger. I wouldn't say that you're breaking the bubble, but at least you are extending the size of your bubble, and the amount of information that you get is obviously bigger. So providing more, data points to whoever is collecting them that are more diverse and more open helps you in bringing you back data that is not only relevant, but also provides you with different views of what is happening in the world.
What I was going to say is that I find the approach in Android, on one side, as the years go on, we see a bigger and bigger focus in the platform itself for security and for privacy. And that can only be a good thing. For example, as we all know, things like scoped storage and also new privacy APIs, the fact that they're distributing the security library through Android X instead of relying on what's baked into the system. All those things are great because they mean that there's options for making things the right way for the user. On the other hand, on a device that has Google Play services, like sure, apps cannot tell what the user is doing, but Google does. And so there's again, it's a trade-off between how much you trust Google with your data. And sure, you can opt out of a bunch of things and you can reset advertisement IDs manually. Unfortunately, there's no automated way to do it. But one thing that I would say Apple has that Google doesn't have is that Apple, as long as it's convenient for them, they will take the privacy option and they will not use the data they collect on device for advertisement, for example, or to build a user profile. Whereas Google, well, it's their business. So you kind of have to be aware of that. And many people don't think about that. So they assume that what they do on their device stays on their device. But we all know both Google and Apple collect information about which apps you run, how long for, and all this context information and metadata from all their users on all their devices. But I would think, and then I don't know, I don't have any data on this, but I would think that if Apple collects this, unless you're in China, in which case sucks to be you, the data that Apple collects is not going to go into an advertisement profile about you. It's going to be used only by them to, for example, define what apps are used the most, which apps crash the most, which features in the device are used the most, and so on, which Google also does, but they probably also use that data for advertisements. So again, trade-offs.
I think just quickly building on top of this, I think there's also a distinction that we need to make because we talk about Android and about Google in a very interchangeable way, but that's technically not the case because Android is open source, and I don't think we should be forgetting that. I think the most secure mobile operating system, I think it's been defined, is called Graphene OS, and that's based on top of Android, but without the Google things, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, the vast majority of users are using the Google flavor of Android, but if one would want a more privacy-centric approach on their device, on their Android device, then they should be going with a flavor of Android that values privacy more than the convenience that Google provides.
Yeah, which is surely not Huawei nor Amazon, because they do exactly the same stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, is their device, so they are going to do whatever they want to do with that, and like we can try to stop that from like a user's point of view. We can try to stop that, maybe, I don't know, like using like a VPN, something that's blocking requests that are going out of your device to specific sites. The other thing is that we are responsible for this. I mean, one thing is the device sending information, or one thing is Google Play services sending that information to some place. Like, okay, there's little that we can do about that. But if you write an app and then you put the Facebook SDK there, that's your responsibility as a developer. There's nothing the user can do about that. And I mean, the Facebook SDK is one of the worst things that you can put in any app. Like they crashed back in May. They crashed I don't know how many iOS apps, and because they had a problem, and people even that were commenting out all the code, all the calls to the SDK, that didn't stop the whole thing from crashing because they were doing things in the background. So also, it's not only about what these big companies do, it's also about what we allow them to do, because at the end of the day, we're sending them that data. So I don't know, things that I do to kind of like try to stop this, and this is like shameless plug, like I use DuckDuckGo as the search engine, obviously, because I work there. There are things that you can do as well as a developer. Like, I mean, it's going to be hard to try to argue if you work in a big company against putting the Facebook SDK if they want you to do that. But I mean, if you can afford it, you can leave the company, I guess, and try to go to any other place that's more aligned with your values. If you have, like, this is a very simple thing that you can do. Probably you have your own personal website, and I bet that you have Google Analytics in there. That's the biggest tracker that currently is in the internet. It's like more than 85% of the websites have Google Analytics. You can just help by removing that and adding something that's more privacy focused, like Fathom, for instance.
That's an excellent point. But let me go back to the discussion of Apple versus Android. And I will say that in some occasions, Apple's decisions are not for their best. So if you look at the assistants, if you look at Google Assistant versus Siri, one is clearly beyond the other in terms of what it can understand and what it can do. And they have decided to go with the lowest power decision, because in that sense, they were trying to provide users with a safer in terms of privacy environment that the other alternative. And it's your choice. Again, as a user, do you want the power of being able to talk to your assistant and getting exactly what you mean? Or are you able to bear with something that you talk to it, and sometimes it understands what you say, sometimes it doesn't, and most of the times it doesn't actually do what you were expecting it to. So trade-offs are not only symbolical, are not only marketing wise. I believe that some of the trade-offs have more meaning behind them than just the marketing that we were mentioning before. Some of them might be for the wrong reasons, but in any case, again, it's your choice how you put your data into one or the other based on that.
Okay, and then we have another question that it's related to what Marcos said before. As Leonardo asks, assuming we have a problem with profiling users, what choices could we as developer make to do this user profilation?
So I guess it depends. The first thing that I'll say is that I wouldn't assume that we have problems. I will just say that we do have problems profiling users. And I think that we should not be doing that, period. So it depends. Like, I know a lot of companies, they're like, I want you to track users' behavior so we can do an experiment, like an A/B test experiment, and then we can decide what thing is best. And I think that's fine. I don't think there is anything wrong with that. I think the problem is if you can identify a specific user. That's the problem. If you want to test if a button works better if it's red or blue, the only thing that you need to know is how many clicks did the red one got and how many the blue got. You don't need to know if that user before went to this other screen, if that user came from Spain or it came from Italy or it came from the UK. All that profiling, like you don't need that. And then the other problem, which is, again, like, it's kind of like coming back to what we said before, is that if you use third-party tools to give you those analytics, they're just going to get that information for free. I cannot always go back to Facebook, but Zoom, like a few months ago, they implemented the whole signing, logging with Facebook thing, and they found out that the Facebook SDK was collecting information that they didn't really need to log in. So that's the problem when you deal with third-party SDKs and third-party analytics kind of things. I think, like, for me personally, the best thing that you can do is just implement your own thing, and the only thing you need to do is just a counter, just how many for blue, how many for red, and compare those, and that's it. You don't need any other information at all.
One thing I would say, I was recently trying to replace Google Analytics on my personal blog and website, because as Marcus has said, yeah, it's just yet another way to give Google free data. And sure, I get analytics out of it, and sure, I get it for free, but I don't feel entirely comfortable with it. And so I was looking into an open source analytics SDK, which is called Aki. And I was trying to set it up, and I know almost nothing about DevOps and things like that. And it's unfortunate that it's such a pain for me to set up something that is privacy conscious and that respects users' privacy, as compared to Google Analytics, which is like copy paste this and you're done. And I think we're once again hitting the convenience as well. It's not just can I get this feature, or can I get enough of this feature for me and my company to make a living out of, but it's also, is this thing something that takes me half a day to set up, or does it take me 2 months to set up? Because there's also something there that you need to consider.
And from the company point of view, using some analytics, putting the effort of integrating the analytics, supporting it, because sometimes these alternatives are not very well supported. So you have to do part of your own support. And having to have all these in place, if it is not your core business to do analytics, you're putting money of your company and time of your people into something that is not what you are meant to do in the market. Your investors, or even if it is your own company, you are pursuing some other goals. You're looking for making businesses in some other ways other than analytics. So there should be better ways, and I totally buy that I should use something that is not Google Analytics for my website, but sometimes it's beyond my ability to do so. It's the same thing that what you mentioned before, Sebastiano, regarding the Android version that is more secure, that is based on the open source of Android, is probably beyond most. I wouldn't say most of the people in this conference, but at least most of the families that we have. If I tell my mom, use this version of Google that is going to be, of Android, that's going to be far more secure, chances are that this won't happen ever. Let's be honest about that. So.
I want to touch on both the third-party thing and work back to a developer API bit. Especially in a very, very small startup, and I've been in ones where it's just 4 people, and they're cash strapped and all this stuff. A very common excuse in those places is, oh, there's this drop-in code, and we have so little money, and this costs nothing, or it's free because you are giving them your data. It's very easy to use a third-party tool, especially for analytics. There's a lot out there that the space is crowded, and therefore prices are low, and it's easy to get in on a free level. I think it's important for privacy-focused developers to make solutions that are approaching how easy that is. I don't know if it can ever get there because there's so much money behind those companies that they can keep making their solution even easier. One thing that is promising, though, in terms of privacy and APIs and usage is the Android X security package in terms of dropping that into your app and how that encrypts things. It implements the same exact interface as shared preferences. It's just encrypted shared preferences, which is beautiful and wonderful to see. And if more tools can be like that in terms of there's a standard interface for analytics data maybe, and then we make open source tools that are, you can host them yourself, you can ingest all your data about your users and what they're clicking on or whatever. The other thing is, I think both developers and product people and BI and business intelligence people and data scientists, they need to communicate more often about the data that they're collecting and decide whether they're ever going to use it. I have personally seen when data is collected as part of an experiment go unused forever. And that is really disappointing from a privacy perspective. So on the flip side of that, laws like GDPR and CCPA, when they came about and they pushed the entire community, especially suddenly America tech, it was wonderful to see that there was a reaction, that it wasn't just, oh, we'll pay the fine, that all these companies are starting to take this much more seriously. And now we have data protection officers who are accountable and responsible. And the more regulation and the more responsibility that can be made, and the clearer that those laws can be, the better it'll be.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more here. Like, first of all, like, share encryptor preferences, like, amazing. I actually used that like 3 weeks ago. And it's great now that we have these tools that they have like a master key. You don't have to worry about anything else, whereas before it was just a nightmare to try to encrypt any kind of data. So, I mean, yeah, we got in there. The whole thing will improve. Then kind of like going back to like third parties and like privacy focused companies like ourselves. I actually like our motto, like our slogan is kind of like privacy simplified, because we acknowledge that it's basically what you say. It's not easy. Like if you want to have 100% privacy, not everyone can get like a Pi-hole, plug that to the router, so it filters out every single thing that goes out. It's just not doable. So yeah, there's a lot there that we, as developers, and especially like companies that are privacy focused, that we need to do to make it as simple as Google, like when it comes to install like Google Analytics and things like that. And I think we'll get there. And I think the reason why we're gonna get there is because it's what you said, like this is getting a lot of attention now. And it's getting to a point where like 9 out of 10 Americans think that privacy is a human right. You asked that question 10 years ago, you probably wouldn't get that answer anymore. So it's changing. And like we said, like Google and Apple and all these companies, I mean, even Facebook, they're moving towards more privacy. I think that the main problem that they have right now is that we don't trust them. And we don't trust them because trust is something that has to be earned. Like they have to build up that trust again. And it's going to take a while, especially if they keep reacting to things like you cannot remove biases in your advertising platform just because you have been sued 5 times in the last year. Or you cannot do that just because Facebook has been sued 5 times in the last, I don't know how many years, and they just paid like $5 million to get out of the lawsuits, which is nothing compared to the actual revenue. So I don't know, I think that there's a lot there. I think we'll get there. We like, first and foremost, we need to simplify privacy for people, because otherwise it's not going to happen. And then regulators, like we need laws for this. Like GDPR is a good example. The problem with GDPR, for what I've seen, is that now what you get is a dialogue that tells you, hey, we want your cookies so you can have a more personalized experience, when in reality it's like, hey, we want your cookies because we want to keep sending that to third-party companies. So it goes back to like privacy washing, like, yeah, we're doing something, but we're hiding why we're doing it.
And about laws, do you think someone asked do you think that we need a global law about privacy, or it's fine that every country or like continent like in Europe does its own law?
I mean, ideally it will be something global, but that's not going to happen in China, is it? So I mean, we're getting there. One of the things that we have realized at DuckDuckGo is the fact that we need to be there. We need to be in that environment. So now we have like a good privacy like lawyer team that are fighting for that. Our CEO has been in the Senate like a few different times arguing why privacy is important. So I think it's one of the things that we really need to, we need better laws. We need GDPR. We need like a better version of GDPR anyways. We have seen this year how like all these companies, Facebook, Apple, Google, Amazon, blah, 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 they have been summoned to like between like antitrust hearings and things like that to answer some questions. It's a good beginning. It's not enough. We need to do more, because unless we put regulations out there, they're just going to keep doing what they want to do.
Yeah, and I would add to that, as Marcus, as you said, it would be nice if it were universal, at least if there was a baseline. And I think it's especially important that even if it's not mandatory universally, that privacy is 100% respected for everyone, because different people might have different needs and expectations. Some might prefer to sell their data to Google and Facebook to get those services for free, and that's fair enough. It's their choice. But I wish that it was at least universally mandated and regulated, that the actual usages your data will be used for are clear to everyone. It's not just like, oh yeah, accept whatever, I don't even read whatever, I don't care. Because that's unfortunately what's happening, is that the most that's been obtained by regulation is a big accept button, which is generally the bigger, most prominent action you have. And if you want these to, for example, opt out of tracking cookies, you need to go in a smaller link, and then a window pops up, and then there's a huge list of advertisers, and you need to turn them off one by one, or usages, and you need to turn them off one by one. You need to click the right button, not the big button, because the big button is accept all, and the smaller one actually says, oh yeah, actually, yeah, save whatever I said, not what you want me to say. And still you have no idea what that data will be used for, because maybe it's generic, maybe it doesn't really say. There's a few websites and a few services that I think do it right, in the sense of they give you like a scale, a slider that you can move, and it tells you the things that will not be done with the current selected level of cookies, for example. So if you put to none, it will say, well, I will not remember who you are, so you cannot log in, you cannot leave comments, you cannot do this, you cannot do that, but you will be anonymous. Whereas you can move one step forward and say, okay, now you can log in and you can have your account, but you are not anonymous anymore, but I will still not track your information and actions for experiments, so for internal use, or I will not use that data for advertisements, so I will not send it to third parties, and so on and so forth. And I think that's probably the only semi-effective way to present this choice to users, because a binary choice will not cut it, especially when it's made unclear which one is the privacy conscious one, and it's the hardest path to go through. And there's a name actually for these design patterns, which is called dark patterns. And this is the kind of design that maliciously drives people to a specific direction, especially when it comes about opt-ins, because by GDPR, you have to opt in to tracking. So what they do is they make opting in a go away button, and they make opting out, well, not opting in this case, they make it extremely difficult. So I wish it was regulated that opting in and not opting in were as prominent, and the benefits and costs would be obvious to everyone. And that's not all, though, because if you want to use Google services and Google just says, well, no, you're not going to use the service if you don't allow us to track you for advertisement. Like, there is no option for me to say, I'm happy to pay, I don't know, $5 a month, but you don't track me. Like, you can get a paid G Suite account, but you need a VAT number, you need a company, and the rollout of features is weird and it's not always the same. And some features you only get if you have a normal account, some features you only get if you have a business account, but depending on the type of business, that's a pain. Why can I not have a private Google account that I pay for if I so choose to?
Yeah, the dark patterns that LinkedIn made famous, unfortunately, and everyone then copied. But I think one of the things besides regulation is also we should also do that, but also education. Right now, when computer science students go through college, ethics is an elective. It's not part of any required accredited curriculum anywhere, as far as I know. Definitely not in the United States. And I remember taking that course and being like, oh, wow, that's a very interesting mindset. We should definitely do this. And thinking about the past decade, and if everyone had just been like, oh, let's get on the same page before we start creating all this technology of what is good for the user, what is good for the public, and then be able to be armed to have the conversation when a company asks you to do something that might be unethical. Well, if you don't have that education, that background, then as a junior developer, you'll probably be like, oh yeah, I just got out of college and I'll do whatever you want. And that's how I imagine a lot of the technology that we've built up has been written, is developer just says, yes, not understanding or not knowing the consequences. Regulation helps on the one side, but I think education can help on the other.
And I think that regulation is not very welcome every time that somebody creates a new law. I mean, like, let's be honest here. When GDPR was issued and was approved, we were all trying to make our websites compliant and trying to make our applications compliant. It was a pain. And we, I mean, like, probably the comment that we heard the most was these politicians have no idea of how technical things happen. So the regulation they've done is a mess and is not very useful. And we are expecting now to have a regulation that solves every problem in the world. And I think that education, as Jason pointed out, is probably as important, if not more, than regulation itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think education is fundamental here. Also, I mean, I didn't have like any ethics like subject at all. I had a legal subject though, which is interesting, how not to get sued, but that's like a different issue. And also, like, this whole thing is like education-wise, like, you go to a college, you get your degree, you have that course. Like, the thing that is scary to me is how much biases are going to be there. I mean, but we need to let everyone know that there are implications when data is shared, and not just data like you just bought this TV. It's about racial data as well and how that's been used. You get, like, police in Egypt, you get in there using Grindr and then just jailing LGBT people just because of that. So they're using technology, they're using data to jail people. And then the thing that I wouldn't do is what Seb said, is that I wouldn't pay Google $5 for a private experience. I think that should be the default experience for everyone. And it's just that I think that's one of the problems that we have, which is, I mean, it's obvious, because we don't think that privacy can be easily done. We don't think we can get privacy. So we get to a point where it's like, well, I'll pay you just so I can get my privacy. When the reality should be the opposite. It's like, you should be paying me for my data. If you want my data, then pay me money. And then, yes, like dark patterns and all that, like GDPR, we're hiding behind dark patterns just to avoid GDPR. And actually, a lot of the websites, it doesn't even matter what you do. You get the dialogue, like the GDPR dialogue, you go to cookies and they're still tracking you. So yeah, there is a lot we need to do. Like definitely better laws, and it's going to be a pain to implement some of those. But the problem is that we're not really finding the best way to implement them. We're just finding how can we make this quick and how to move fast and break things and screw everyone over.
Yeah, just to quickly respond, yes, obviously it would be great if the default option would be it's free to use and you don't have to compromise your privacy. It was just an example to say in some cases it might not be possible. And in that case, then it would only make sense that there was an alternative option where, I mean, I use a service and I pay for the service that I get. That's a fair alternative. You don't have to have advertisement. You don't have to have free things. You can also have things that are paid, but don't have advertisement, don't track you, respect you, and everything else. So that's just, I wanted to make that clear.
And
yeah, I know.
One comment to this. I think that sorry, Marco, you want to go ahead? It's going to be quick. Yeah?
No.
Okay.
Please go.
One quick comment. So between paying for a service for the privilege of not being tracked as opposed to using the service for free and being tracked, I know like maybe ethically it's not the best thing, but some people really cannot afford to pay for such services. And one could argue that they should still be given access to opportunities that other people that do have the spending power to buy services without being tracked. I think, I don't know, it's a tricky topic for me because on one hand, yeah, I don't want to be tracked. I don't want my data to be exploited. And maybe I have the purchasing power to make sure that this doesn't happen. But what about the other people? So yeah, it's a trade-off here yet again, I think.
Yes.
I think that's the problem, and that's why everything should be private by default, because you shouldn't have to be able to afford privacy. Like if we say, okay, if you don't want ads that actually end up tracking you, which is very unfortunate, like you can have ads that do not track you actually. But if you want to avoid my application from tracking you, then you pay like $5, whatever we said. Who can afford that? Because the people who can afford that, usually they don't really care about their privacy. They don't have any problems. It's just us, like white males mostly. The people that cannot afford that are usually from underrepresented groups. And those are the ones that actually suffer from those biases. When you have an ad platform that's targeting against races, and when you allow that platform to be able to say, hey, I want to publish this job advertisement, but I want to focus on white males. I want to exclude women. I want to exclude, I don't know, women with kids. I want to exclude Black people. That's the problem. And if those are the people that cannot afford to buy privacy, then we're just kind of like building up into the same thing where it's like, we're white males. We don't really care about privacy, but we're hurting a lot these underrepresented groups that don't have the opportunity.
Yep. I agree absolutely 100%. Privacy shouldn't be a paid thing. My previous example I realized was not very well well explained. I meant if I want to have something that doesn't have advertisement, I should have the option to take that all off. And by default, advertisement should not track you. Well, should never track you. It's not like should, must never track you. Also because there's no proof that tracking an advertisement ever works and it gives any advantage to anyone. It's just like, yeah, we track people because we think it's going to be better. But as far as I'm aware, there's no study that actually says if you track people, your ads work best. As far as I know, it's more like, oh yeah, our ads are the best because we can be extremely racist about who they're shown to. But there's no proof of that. So that's like, it's a fake problem in the first place.
But coming back to the payment, I mean, like, although I understand that it shouldn't be paid, when users have a choice between an app that doesn't do any tracking, but you have to pay for it, and a free app that I can download and play with it without ever having to pay a dime for that, let's be honest, many users choose to go with the free option that what you pay is what you have done with the app is collected by someone and shared and used somewhere. And so sometimes people are doing that choice between applications that can be free but collect your data and applications that aren't free because the developers, the company behind that application has put the effort on doing a job that they want to they want to be having some money out of that effort, and they want to have some recompense, some reward out of that what they were doing as an effort. So we should reward companies that do their job and pay attention to not having any tracking thing there, to do the stuff that we were mentioning before regarding not going with the first library that solves the problem for you, that makes things easier, but makes things hard for the privacy of your users. And putting all this effort should be rewarded.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to the fact that we're building those apps, so we should take responsibility for what we do, and we should know what the consequences are. It's not about that I'm going to create my free app, I'm going to put ads because I don't want to charge people, so I can get some money out of that. That's valid. Like, you don't want to work for free. I definitely don't want to work for free. But you need to know the consequences of what you're doing. You need to know what could happen with that data. It's not about, should I collect this data? I mean, that's definitely one of the questions that you should be asking yourself if you're doing that. But the other thing is, I think the most important question is, what will the worst people do with that data? And those answers are not easy. Like what I said, like Egypt, just yelling LGBT people. Like, it's difficult to digest some of what's going on out there. And education is very important. Like, we need to spread the knowledge of what's happening with the data that we are collecting. Well, we are collecting, like other companies are collecting, because we are using certain SDKs or analytics.
One other. Oh,
please go, Jason.
Sure. This is short. So one other aspect I wanted to point out was, so there's the point at which you're like deciding whether to collect data and then where it goes, etc. I think it's important, if you have decided to collect data, that you also have a plan to delete it, and make that. GDPR requires that, but regardless of whether you operate in an area where GDPR applies or not, having a plan to delete data gives power back to the user in terms of their own privacy, and also just makes planning your entire feature and your data set much more thorough and much more responsible. That should just definitely be, if you are doing any kind of data collection, there should be a checklist of, questions like, do I need this, etc. And then the last one on the list absolutely needs to be, how do users delete this? How do we delete this? How do we ensure that this is only kept for 30, 90, or 180 days, whatever like the company as a whole agrees to keep data for. And honestly, past 180 days, what do you care that like a user clicked on a button and when that experiment was running, whether it was red or blue as a button, that isn't relevant anymore. So
just another question, but don't you think that sometimes, all these privacy concerns damages us, like as a collectivity? I can think about the pandemic contact tracing. I don't know in the rest of the world, but in Italy we talked a lot about privacy and how our smartphone can track us to give us a better contact tracing, and we ended up with a Bluetooth-based, BLE-based contact tracking that is for sure less efficient than ones that combines both BLE and, for example, GPS data. Don't you think that maybe sometimes in some occasions it should be fine for us to give up on privacy for the community?
I actually remembered an example I was going to bring up before. Android has a notification API, and there's no permission needed for it. And you can immediately send push notifications to a device the second it has your app installed. Whereas iOS, you absolutely have to hit this hard wall and have notification permission requested. It's totally an opt-out feature on Android. But it is so convenient to know that your user will reliably receive a push notification. So if you have features like informing them of when they receive a message, or anything that's actually important to the user, that you can reliably deliver that. Whereas on the iOS experience, there has to be all these backup methods. And I think that's a great example of, this is very convenient to both the developer and the user, as long as it's used correctly. I definitely feel like there will probably be some restrictions on that API, because it is a little silly in how unrestricted it is. And another part of it is the background processing capabilities. When a push notification is received on Android, you can do a network call in the background for a little bit. You can, this event happened? Well, you can fetch data so that when they open the app, it's convenient for them. But on iOS, when a push notification comes down to the device, it's actually handled and rendered by the operating system, which is a completely different flow. It means you don't have any application instance, you can't load data, you can't provide that convenience. Which experience is better? I think it depends on how abused that API is. And I think that potential for abuse is going to eventually result in some more restrictions there. But I think that's an interesting play of convenience versus.
Yeah, I mean, what you were saying, like about coronavirus, and if in some cases we should just give up privacy. I mean, I don't think we should give up privacy, like, ever. The thing is what we've been saying is, which kind of data do you collect, and do you need that data? When are you going to delete that data? I think the problem with people saying that, oh, these COVID apps, blah, they're tracking me, first of all, is because this is the culture that we currently live in. Like, since Cambridge Analytica, everyone is fully aware of what's going on with their data. So this wouldn't have been a problem like 10 years ago. Now it is, because everyone actually thinks that the data should be private. there are cases that, and it's how you treat that data. The fact that you have been in contact with someone that has COVID and then you get a notification doesn't necessarily mean that you've been tracked somehow. It just depends. It's just like your data point is matched with another one. You get a notification that should get deleted immediately, and they hopefully shouldn't be able to. You shouldn't be able to know that who the other person was. There's a lot of things there. Like this one is quite tricky because it's like location, it's your actual device, so they're definitely going to know who you are. It's been a crappy year. This is really like a difficult situation with coronavirus apps and whatnot. I will argue that I have no idea how effective they're being. I can tell you that in the UK, not a lot for what I see in the news. To the fact that they're losing a lot of cases just because they put the whole CSV file in the wrong format of Excel, but that's a different conversation. So, and the other thing that you were saying is that, yeah, people is kind of like against us, like this, our community, because we are tracking the data. It's like, I mean, they're not wrong about that. we actually do that. They should be mad with us. They have the right to be asking us questions and to question everything that we do. And we need to answer that in a way that we can satisfy everyone and that we can actually start taking responsibility.
Yeah, I very much agree with your view of the things, Marcos. I think, yet again, we go back to one issue that is the one of trust, because at least how I perceive the contact tracing solutions that have been developed during the recent months, like these have been reviewed by peers. These have been developed in an open source fashion. And yeah, I don't think we could have asked almost for more out of this. But at the same time, who's behind the development or like the delivery of these solutions are yet again Apple and Google. So I think this is where people have made this association of, oh yeah, so there's data that is allowing for contact tracing. And where is this data coming from? Oh yeah, it's coming from Google and Apple, or it's going towards them. So I should be wary of this, and therefore I should be complaining or asking questions about my data. So
asking questions is good.
Asking questions is obviously good. But I think the underlying issue is still about trust. And it's about the fact that we as a community no longer trust these companies to do the best or to handle our data in the best possible way.
Okay, thank you. And I have a final question for you, and it would be nice if all of you can give their point of view about this. And I want to ask you if is privacy lost forever, or if we can, in the future, what do you see?
I can start. I don't think that privacy is lost. I think, if anything, we're starting to take back control of our privacy. The problem is that the internet just has been overrun by companies that have made their business model to covertly track, manipulate, and exploit people by using their data. So that's created like a learned helplessness. And so the first thing is that people are aware of that. They need to be aware of that. We as developers need to be aware of that, and we need to make changes, because the reality is that people want privacy, but they just feel powerless to do anything about it. I don't think it's lost. Like, you've seen a lot of companies that are standing up pro privacy practices, like what we try to do. And I mean, it's a long way. Like, let's be honest. Like, we have a 2% share in the US market, like in internet searches, compared to, I don't know, 88 from Google or whatever they have. 2% is nothing, but at least we are demonstrating that you can earn money with this, and you can actually run a business that is not privacy, that is privacy focused. We don't track any users, we don't collect any data. Our GDPR thing is very simple because we don't do anything. So you don't need to accept any kind of policy. You just install the app and you run with it because we're not going to collect any type of data. And it works. And every day in our mobile apps, we're getting like 160,000 installs a day, more or less, and keeps growing. And it's crazy because you see that people actually care about this. So I don't think privacy is lost. I think, if anything, we've just started to see how people care and how companies are going to start to care. And I think we're gonna get to a point where we'll be fine. I mean, I didn't want to leave this roundtable with the feeling that you should not be able to sleep at night. So I think this is like a good message. Like, we're going to get there. Don't worry. We're working on it. And every day more people are working on that.
Yeah, I would just close this very succinctly saying, no, privacy is not lost, but it depends on everyone to get it back, on us as developers, on users to ask that their products that they use respect their privacy. And it depends on regulators to make sure that companies are actually doing what they say they're doing if they're promising privacy. And also trying to make those that aren't promising that, promise it and keep their promises.
Yeah, couldn't agree more with both of you. I think it's just starting, actually. It had the chance of being lost forever, but now since the conversation started, I think it's going to the right direction. Slowly, but as Marco said, we're going to get there.
Yeah, I would like to add that the privacy problem is just different. I mean, like, the amount of traces that we leave for the actions that we do is higher. I mean, because we're working on systems that are able to keep track of every IP that we have used, every system that we have connected to, and we have to figure out, as they were saying before, how to have the benefits of all this digital age, and at the same time keep the privacy that we need, keep the rights that we should have. And yes, I believe that we will get there. It will take us some time, though.
I agree with everybody. I think it is on us, this generation of programmers, to look at where we are and focus our efforts to teach the next generation, hey, this was wrong, what is currently built. And it will take us and them and maybe another generation of programs because there's a lot of work to do to actually make the modern technological world a safe for privacy for people to and for consumers to feel like it is not a lost cause. I think it's just starts with us, and as long as we can educate others, we will eventually get there.
Well, thank you, guys. I like this good perspective for the future, and thank you all for your time. And think that this argument can take a lot of time. We can do an entire a privacy con for the future, because it's a really giant topic. So thank you all, and we will see, I think, Marcos and Jorge talk in a few minutes, and then we'll see you. And thanks again.